But you're all very welcome on this Sunday, the 16th of November, 2025. As always, a special shout out to my little band of Patreon friends and supporters who continue to keep this broadcast afloat. And if you'd like to join their number, then the link is above there. Much appreciated. Now, we will start with the continuing attack on freedom of the press by the pro-Israeli lobby, which continued during the week with the censure of an Italian journalist who happened to ask an uncomfortable question. This is journalist Gabriele Nunziati asking EU Commission spokeswoman Paola Pino a question on the 13th of October.
You have been repeating several times that Russia should repay for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Do you believe Israel should repay for the reconstruction of Gaza, since they have destroyed almost all the strip and the civilian infrastructures?
It's definitely an interesting question on which I would not have any comment at this stage.
Now, because he had the temerity to ask that question, Nunziati was sacked by his employer, Agenzia Nova. When asked to explain the reason for sacking Nunziati, Agenzia Nova said that to conflate Ukraine with Gaza was technically incorrect, and the journalist obviously didn't understand the basic principles of international law. Of course, this is utter bullshit. And this latest incident is of censorship within the media in favour of Israel. Let your man have a word.
At this stage.
This journalist, Gabriele Nunziati, now lost his job. I'm asking a question, basically.
For asking a question.
He didn't even share his opinion. He just asked the question, didn't even share his opinion.
And a very moderate one, because he could have put it much more brutally. He could have said, what Israel has done to Gaza is much, much worse than what Russia has done to Ukraine. And that is true. That's objectively true. I will accept nobody telling me that I'm pro-Russian by saying that. That's an empirical thing. You can actually quantify this fact. What Israel has done to Gaza, and not only Gaza, right? We also have the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and so on, Yemen. What Israel has done to Gaza, Iran, is much worse than what Russia has been doing to Ukraine. Very clear.
An even more disgraceful example of such censorship is the case of Francesca Albanese. Now, Albanese is an Italian legal scholar and expert on human rights who has served as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory since way back in 2022. She recently became the first individual from the United Nations to be sanctioned by the USA. Her crime was to call out the USA and other Western governments for being complicit in the genocide in Gaza. Now here she explains that the personal impact of the US sanctions on her daily life.
I'm the first UN person to be sanctioned.
Le sanzioni americane sono pesantissime, pesantissime.
And the implications are enormous. It's really impairing as a person. It creates a chilling effect around you because anyone who engages with a US sanctioned person risks to be arrested and to be subjected to very heavy fines.
Io sono la madre di una cittadina americana e mio marito lavora per un'organizzazione che è negli Stati Uniti, quindi capite che mi colpiscono al cuore in questo momento. Mia figlia tecnicamente è passibile di arresto e di pene pecuniarie fino ad $1 miliardo per avermi preparato un caffè o per aver preso la mia colazione. Io sono rientrata in Italia, a Napoli, per ragioni familiari. Affitto sempre la macchina, non posso più affittare una macchina perché non ho una carta di credito.
The sanctions are pressure. The United States has been really forceful toward me.
Nessuna banca può aprirmi un conto corrente perché senza il rischio di incorrere in sanzioni secondarie imposte dalla legge americana e durano in perpetuità.
Io sono trattata quasi alla stregua di Osama Bin Laden, soffro grandissime limitazioni e trovo orribile.
So, in the eyes of the Trump administration, a woman campaigning to end a genocidal conflict which has killed over 70,000 innocent Palestinians, and those who haven't been murdered or killed have been maimed or driven from their homes. You know what? Trump views her as on the same level as Osama bin Laden. And thankfully, the rest of the world can see who the real criminals are. And I hope that Francesca Albanese continues to call out those criminals.
Excuse me, but I don't need to hear what Israel says. Can we center the discussion on international law? And this is not my opinion. There is a commission of inquiry, Amnesty International, Israeli historians. I'm fine with responding to any questions, but I would like the discussion not to be centered about what the government that is led by two leaders who are indicted for war crimes and crimes against humanity. My intention is not to debate whether it's genocide or not. This is past. We have failed to prevent genocide. And it's not just me saying that. The entire human rights community, there is a wall-to-wall consensus that Israel...
Staying with Gaza and Israel, the Football Association of Ireland put a marker down regarding continuing to allow Israel to participate in sports with this decision.
Just a little bit of breaking news from the world of football. We're hearing that the Football Association of Ireland has approved a motion to ask UEFA to ban Israeli teams. They held a vote on an ordinary resolution. It passed by a majority of 74 in favour, 7 against and 2 members abstained. 2 reasons. They say the organisation of clubs in illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank without the consent of the Palestinian Football Association. That's in breach of FIFA statutes. And also, they say the failure of the IFA to implement and enforce an effective anti-racism policy, again in breach of UEFA statutes. More on that throughout the evening.
Now, going back to the comparison with Ukraine, why is it that the world denies Russian participation in sporting events, but continues to allow Israel to take part? No doubt, the rich and well-connected Israeli lobby groups such as AIPAC in the USA and both conservative and Labour Friends of Israel in the UK are working hard behind the scenes to stop any such sanctions on the genocidal regime of Benjamin Netanyahu. It's therefore time people made their views known. And I believe the Star of David should be removed from all sporting competitions until Israel ends its ethnic cleansing in Gaza. The woes of the BBC continue to pile up with Donald Trump now. He's threatening to sue the corporation for between $1 and $5 billion over the disastrous Panorama program entitled Trump, A Second Chance. Now, this aired just before Trump won the presidency for the second time. And it's admitted by everybody now that a great mistake was made in the editing of the documentary, which saw 2 parts of a speech Trump made on the day of the attack on the Capitol. They were cut and spliced together, giving the viewers the impression that Trump had basically encouraged those there to attack the Capitol buildings. Now, initially Trump had asked for an apology and the removal of the offensive program, or he'd sue. The BBC gave an apology and removed the program, but Trump has just followed up with this from Air Force One.
What BBC did, nobody would even think a thing like that was done. They actually changed the words coming out of my mouth.
So the BBC has apologised and retracted the report, but they say they won't pay any compensation.
Well, we'll sue them. We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week.
So you're ready to take?
Well, I think I have to do it. I mean, they've even admitted that they cheated. I mean, not that they couldn't have not done that. They cheated. They changed the words coming out of my mouth. That's worse than what CBS did with Kamala.
Now, the Donald has always been litigious and is no doubt emboldened, having won defamation cases against both ABC and CBS in the USA, with both of them paying him $16 million in reparation. He also pocketed another $25 million from Facebook and Instagram. And it's obvious now that in the US, media companies have decided it's just better to pay him off. Pay him off rather than get into a war with this lunatic for another 3 years. His attack on the BBC may not be as easy for the old Donald, with the corporation pointing out that they had already fulfilled 2 of his conditions in offering the apology and taking the Panorama programme down. What I find strange, people, is that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has been found missing in action yet again when it comes to defending the BBC against Trump. I've no doubt, admittedly, that Keir is somewhat focused on what's going on within 10 Downing Street. And that's where all his focus is going. Like the child's in trouble. I made this prediction regarding Starmer way back on the 29th of October. Decisions. As for Starmer, he's already a bust flush, right? His new deputy leader is somebody he sacked a couple of weeks ago, threw off the cabinet. There is no way that disaster is going to lead the Labour Party at the next election. Indeed, I'd make a guess he's so incompetent and so biased towards Israel, he may not even be there next year. And with the shenanigans going on this week, I could be proved right. As there was Machiavellian manoeuvring in 10 Downing Street, with briefings attacking Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who some believed was about to lead a coup to unseat Starmer. Now, most informed observers believe that briefing came from Starmer's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. Now, so far, Starmer, he stood by McSweeney. But such has been the turmoil in 10 Downing Street, with the polls, they're falling through the floor for Labour. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeve, well, she's been forced to dump her plans to increase income tax in this upcoming budget. This leaves her with virtually no headroom going into the winter. What's she going to cut now? What's she going to put up now? That's what I'm worried about. I've got a pension coming in a couple of years. She'll probably just cut that all together. Now, one Labour backbencher, well, he even suggested that Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham, who is a very, very decent politician, by the way, well, he said that he should be brought back into Westminster and take over Labour leadership. And as Starmer stumbles from disaster to disaster, as he licks up to Israel and licks up to Trump, I honestly believe it won't be long before others join in the campaign for change at the top. And Starmer's gone. Now, going from the macro regarding the BBC to the micro, BBC Northern Ireland also has a glaring problem that desperately needs to be addressed. That is, its overuse of extreme minority voices, such as that belonging to the diminutive Jim Allister. Now, let me tell you what, Allister leads a party of 1 MLA, 1 MP and 10 councillors, yet seems to have a permanent seat on pretty much every political and current affairs programme that goes out on BBC Northern Ireland. That means that his claim this week on the Talkback show that unionism was being underrepresented on the very show, well, in my view, that was hilarious. Listen to this.
Well, just before I come to that, could I just make a comment, given the day that's in it, that the panel you've chosen to put together for this segment demonstrates and typifies the institutional bias of the BBC, in particular your programme Talkback, because here you have 3 against 1 on an issue, which is typical of Talkback. You have 2 panellists who are in favour of the DUP, of unionists being represented, and you have yourself an activist.
I'm not an activist.
With a very left-wing worldview. Of course,
I also have Steve Aiken, the Ulster Unionist MLA, who will be attending.
Then it's 3. Then it's 4.
And I've got a clip from him. So the question today is whether it's right for the DUP to go or not.
It's a lineup of 3 panellists plus an activist presenter against 1 person.
Just saying it doesn't make it true, Jim.
To present an alternative view. Let me give you that alternative view.
Not very nice calling a journalist an activist, or whatever he called him. Let's be clear, people. Jim Allister represents a minuscule proportion of the Northern Ireland population. It is therefore time that BBC NI recognises that fact and stops giving him a disproportionate amount of time on their programmes. But I've had to go to the BBC here, but let me be clear. I am a fan of the BBC. I genuinely believe that public service broadcasting adds to all our lives and produces output which would never be made if it were down simply to market forces. Like, if you want to watch television based solely on profit and loss sheets, go to the USA, where commercial breaks make up as much time as the actual show you're watching. The BBC remains one of the world's most trusted news providers. But, and this is a big but, the war within its boardroom between the political left and the political right is like in 10 Downing Street, resulting in institutional turmoil. And while the Panorama edit was sloppy, the programme itself was factually correct. Insofar, it was Trump who brought that mob onto the streets of Washington, where they attacked Capitol Hill. Now, what's worried me much more over the last few years hasn't been the BBC's handling of Trump, no, but its clear bias regarding the ongoing genocide in Gaza.
We're being gaslit that the BBC is left-wing, even though all of the available evidence tells us the other way around.
What's the other thing we've been gaslit about the BBC?
The biggest gaslighting of all is this Michael Prescott report says that the BBC, wait for it, we're going to do a little drum roll. The BBC, folks, pro-Palestinian.
And anti-Israel. What he did is he focused on the BBC Arabic service, and a lot of the critique actually relies on comparing BBC Arabic to BBC News Online. Yeah. Now, we know from the stats what the truth is, because
I brought some stats.
Great, well, I've got some to you do them.
You go.
The Centre for Media Monitoring, they found in the first year of the genocide, they looked through a vast amount of broadcast, online content, all the rest of it. They found that even though the official statistics at the time found 34 times more Palestinians than we killed than Israelis, a drastic underestimate, by the way, but nonetheless, the BBC gave Israeli deaths 33 times more coverage per fatality. They used emotive terms 4 times more for Israeli victims. They applied massacre 18 times more to Israeli casualties. They used murder 220 times for Israelis and once for Palestinians. They interviewed 1,085 Palestinians compared to 2,350 Israelis. And they shared the Israeli perspective 2,340 times compared to 217 times.
11 times as much they did the Israeli perspective.
The airbrushing of Israeli atrocities, the failure to name the perpetrator.
Oh yeah, the lack of agency. All of the BBC News headlines online have been astonishing. I've mentioned this one before. There's one that got my eye always. There was one where a Palestinian man had lost 100 members of his family, and the headline was something along the lines of "Man loses 100 members of his family." What, down the back of a couch?
But they did
where did he lose them?
It was constantly.
And it was like the 30th or 31st paragraph where they go, he says the Israelis bombed his family. You have to wait 30 paragraphs to find out who killed his family.
But that's the other thing they do, because they would say, even when it was objectively true. So, for example, they did one headline in which the headline was the Israeli president denied that a hospital was being struck by missiles as it was objectively being struck by missiles. But the other thing that we
by the way, they never do that for Ukraine. One point is the BBC, you might be watching and thinking, look, lay off the BBC. They've got to be impartial. They've got to do this, but they don't do it for Ukraine. For Ukraine, they'll say Russia bombed hospital.
But it gets worse, because what they also do, this is the problem, it's endless, is they will frame stories about atrocities when they actually write about them, or attacks. They will frame often paragraph after paragraph around Israeli claims.
Yes.
Even though we know as a fact that Israel's authorities lie over and over again. And when something objectively happens, they will say, Hamas claims this, even though it's just the fact that, this hospital or these paramedics have been slaughtered. The fact is, the BBC's coverage of Israel's genocide is one of the great journalistic crimes of our age.
I agree.
Remember this, people, long after Trump is a faint memory. The BBC's disgraceful reporting on Gaza will remain a taint on its hard-earned journalistic reputation. Staying with the world of journalism, Brendan Murphy, one of the giants of press photography, sadly died during the week. Now, Brendan spent most of his career working for the Irish News, where he was a mentor and friend to generations of photographers and journalists. His talent as a photographer resulted in him winning just about every award in his profession. But it was his kindness and generosity which I will always remember. Now, I met Brenton when I was putting together my DVD Tear Gas, up there somewhere. Peace had arrived, and I had built up all this material about living during the Troubles and growing up during the Troubles, and I wanted to sort of put it away somewhere, just box it off, put it. So I decided to do a DVD. And it was, right, and looking through the stuff, I realized that I really needed contemporaneous photographs from the time as a way of explaining to people who weren't from here some of the nuances of life during the conflict. And that's when I came across this amazing publication. This is Brendan's book, Eyewitness. And within the covers of this book, I found every photograph I needed. They were perfect. So being a cheeky wee bugger, I cold called Brendan in the Irish News. And he invited me down to meet him in his office. And the Irish News then was in Lower Donegal Street, the old offices. So in I went and met a very big man with a warm smile who offered me a seat at his desk and asked me, "What, son, can I do for you?" So I laid it all out to Brenton, told him about my DVD and asked if he'd allow me to use some of his pictures, which of course I naturally would pay for and recompense him for. Now, within about 3 or 4 minutes, Brendan looking at me, he had no idea who I was. You see, the thing about Brendan went to bed every night at 10 o'clock. So he'd never seen anything I'd been on TV, and he certainly had never been to a comedy club in his life. So there I was sitting. But luckily for me, there was one connection. And that was my late father, who, like Brenton, had owned a pub in Belfast in the 1960s and 70s. Brenton had started off as a publican. He'd owned a pub in West Belfast, which had been demolished during redevelopments in the 1970s. Now, how Brenton got into the journalistic photography, press photography, was interesting because when he was in the pub, he told me he'd been very impressed by the mountain of journalists and press photographers, which of course swamped into Belfast at the start of the Troubles. So when his pub was knocked down, he made a leap. He made a real leap and decided to try his hand and make a career as a press photographer. Now, he told me all this story, many stories, as we sat chatting for nearly an hour. And then he did something which still astounds me. Brenton sat me in front of his computer and opened up his life's work, the catalogue of all his pictures, and said to me, "Son, take you half an hour there, and you tag whatever footage you want and put them in that folder." I did as I was told. And when I'd finished, he pressed a button and zoomed them over onto my email. Now, I thanked him. This is brilliant news. This is brilliant. And I, of course, asked him how much he owed him. I didn't know what it was. To which he replied, "That's all right, son. You buy me a diabetic cake." No, I protested as you would. I said, no, Brenton, you're very kind, Brenton, you're very kind. But like, no, seriously, I want to pay for these. He would not hear of it. He would have none of it. He simply refused to take any money. Now, people, first off, I was wanting his pictures out of this book for a commercial purpose, my DVD. So, Brendan should have charged me the going rate. Secondly, I just walked off the street and Brenton didn't know me from Adam. So again, he should have charged me the going rate. The fact he refused to do so exemplifies the generosity of that man. I got to know Brenton a bit over the inter years, whatever. He became ill. He became ill with cancer, but he survived that for about 15 years and continued to help so many people in so many different ways. Pretty much every press photographer in this place has a story to tell about how Brenton helped them as they were beginning their careers. And it wasn't just photographers. Brendan also acted as a mentor for many young journalists starting off. And when the opportunity arose, his generosity even stretched to helping a wee stand-up comic he had never heard of. I want to show you a couple of Brenton's pictures. Now, Brenton, it wasn't just the Troubles. Brenton covered the whole of life here, all over the last 30 years. I used this first picture. Now, this first picture of a guy being searched. I used this in my DVD. Now, while this image will no doubt appear strange to those born after peace, this was a daily occurrence for those of us who grew up in working class areas such as the Shankill, the Falls, the New Lodge, or Tigers Bay. Now, this second picture, captures the arrest by the police of 2 suspected bombers in central Belfast. The story here is Brenton was on his way home. He saw the kerfuffle. He got out of his car and went over. But there were obviously, because there was bombs involved, everyone was kept miles back. Now, Brendan's technology, the camera that he had in those days, with the zoomed as far as he could zoom it, when he looked at his wee screen, it was completely black. Didn't deter Brendan. He got down and took the pictures, pressed the old shutter. And knowing Brendan, he managed to get a brilliant shot. Brendan also captured the local sporting world. And this picture is of Hughie Russell giving his mother a kiss after one of his wars during one of his fights. Now, what makes this all the more poignant an image is Hughie also became an award-winning photographer with the Irish News and sadly passed away in 2023. Years after Brenton had retired from the Irish News, I'd started writing a weekly column for the paper. And one day, I received an envelope with a lovely wee note in it from Brendan telling me how much he was enjoying my column. This again was an example of a man who loved to help and encourage others, and who will live long in my memory and the memories of all those whose lives he touched. Oh, by the way, before I go, you can't really, if you get this in the second bookshop, snap it up. If you get that, you'll be very lucky, because it's something like £85 and Amazon had checked. But Brenton had a new collection of photographs which just came out just before he died, God love him. And it's called Once Upon a Time in Belfast. And who's it published by? It's published by Belfast Archive Project. And there's some brilliant images in this. You know what I mean? If you're born anywhere from 60 to whatever, you'll find the images that Brendan captures are like time machines to suddenly bring you back to the sad times and the glad times. Because in the case of Brendan Murphy, a picture most certainly was worth 1,000 words.
You'll do nothing. You hear me? You'll do nothing.